Your students are constantly on a smartphone or a tablet, and this often raises the question, is technology somehow ruining their literacy skills or limiting their abilities to develop them? That's coming up in this video. Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Lee Hall from Literacy Teachers, and I'm all about giving you the tools you need to inspire, motivate, and change how your students read and write for academic success. If you're new here, this is a place where we share and discuss tools and information that you can use right now to help your students improve their abilities as readers and writers. So let's get on to today's question, which is technology ruining our students' literacy skills? So, that sort of depends on who you talk to and where we are with the research and understanding this. But in many instances, the answer to this is going to be no, it's not. But what it's doing is it's changing them. So a few years ago, there was this great TED talk by John McWhorter called Texting is Killing Language. And one of the things that he, actually, let me back up, I said that wrong. Texting is killing language, JK, just kidding. And he talked about how texting has its own grammars, its own functions, its own code, its own form, right? So when you're texting, you use code like, be right back is BRB, or just kidding is JK, or the very famous laugh out loud, right, is LOL, and any other number of things. And you can incorporate emojis. And there's the way that grammar looks for texting is not the way that grammar and spelling, etc., look when you're writing a paper in school for, an academic subject. And kids know this. Now, that's not to say that they may not try to sort of, blend some of what they do with texting and bring that into your classroom and put it into an academic paper. But, and then you have to decide what you want to do with that, of course. But the thing is that students should be learning specific ways of reading and writing in school and how those are similar to or different from the other ways that they read or write and other contexts, for example, such as texting. So in that sense, no, texting's not ruining, as an example, texting's not ruining students' literacy skills. What it is doing, though, is evolving and changing how students communicate, how we as a society communicate with each other. So another really good example is thinking about how we search for information. When I was a kid, it was card catalog all the way, right? We learned that skill in elementary school, and I just kept on using it, right, for a very, very, very long time. And it was a useful skill, right? But if you think about it, as far as a search skill goes, it's not that complicated because as a student, I was bound to whatever texts were in the library, right? So that's it. That's all I could have access to. So in terms of having to identify and evaluate, what text would be appropriate for a research project, I was very limited to the confines of my school library, right? And every once in a while I might go to a public library, but even still, my public library where I wasn't that big. So I was still bound to that. With obviously with a search engine like Google or even, a school search engine, in a library, right, searching becomes more complex and it gives you greater access to text, because now instead of just being limited to doing my research in the school library, I can use a school library text, but then I can also get on Google and find other books and news articles and videos, right, and pictures and a whole wealth of information. So now, right, if anything, that's an example of how technology is not ruining our students' literacy skills, but is actually complicating them, right? And giving us things that we need to teach students, right, about how they find text, text being anything from a picture, a video, a traditional book, how they evaluate them in terms of if it's appropriate for the questions that they have, if it's reliable and valid content. If anything, that's an example of something that's become far more complex. But now, on the other hand, there are some things that we need to be aware of. This is not just all, things are different, things are easier, some other things are more complex. There is some research that's saying that students are having more difficulty reading connected text because what's happening is when they get on the internet, they're used to skimming and scanning. They're not used to sitting down and reading a 300-page novel, for example. So you're going to need to keep that in mind, that students might struggle with that. But I think that's something that we can work on and build on and help students develop that stamina for right? So that they're able to sit down and read extended text. The other thing to know, and this has been coming out in the last few years, is that we are more likely to remember information when when we're taking notes, when we write it down by hand, not when we, type it into a laptop, okay? So that's not necessarily that something's ruining our literacy skills, but that's just sort of thinking about how do we take notes, right? We have a shift here. My note-taking abilities could be just as good or just as bad, right? Regardless of what format I use, but my ability and capacity to remember information is most likely going to be better if I hand write it, all right? So that's something else to keep in mind. So overall, technology not ruining literacy skills. There are definitely some shifts. There are definitely some evolution in terms of how we use literacy, some changes to keep in mind going forward. So thanks for watching, and if you liked this, please subscribe so that you can catch all of my videos. And while you're at it, head down to the comments. Let's talk about technology use. What kinds of challenges do you have with it? What kinds of things do your students struggle with? What do you see in terms of their literacy abilities as connected to technology? Do you see things becoming more enhanced? Do you see them having certain difficulties with things? Let's talk about it so that you can inspire, motivate, and change how your students read and write for academic success.